The Swedish government views the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as an overarching and forward-looking commitment that Sweden is to be guided by. The concept of sustainable development is central and aims to a development that meets the needs of the present without jeopardizing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Sustainable Development Goal number 1, no poverty. Sweden does well in international comparison with a high standard of living and well-developed welfare system. The instrument of government stipulates, inter alia, that the public institutions are to work for all the citizens to be able to attain participation and equal in society and counteract discrimination. Absolutely, poverty does not exist in Sweden today. In that sense, poverty has been eliminated, but there are great economic differences in society. Sweden has no national definition of poverty. A frequently used EU measure is the proportion of the population that has a disposable income lower than 60% of the national median income. In Sweden, 15% of the population is below this threshold. In recent years, disposable income has increased within all groups of society, but to a lesser degree among those with lower incomes. On average, women have lower salaries than men. This pay gaps is largely due to the fact that the labor market is characterized by a gender segregation. Goal 2. End hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Access to food is good in Sweden. Hunger is among the exceptions, and although there are no exact figures, the occurrence of malnutrition in children is marginal. Very few children in Sweden suffer from growth retardation due to malnutrition. Data instead points to an increase in overweight and obesity in society over the past few decades. This increase is tangible in the age of group 16 to 27 years. More than half of all adults in Sweden are overweight or obese. However, there are elderly people who suffer from malnutrition. Swedish agriculture is not small scale. Data shows an increasing productivity in Swedish agriculture. Sweden's production value per annual full-time equivalent has increased in total over the past decades. Employment in the agricultural sector, measured as a number of full-time equivalent in the sector, has fallen continuously over a long period of time. The production capacity of Swedish farmland is assessed to be good. The status of ecosystem services of cultivated lands is assessed to be satisfactory today. The commitment regarding the sustainable agriculture area lacks an agreed definition. If the proportion of organically cultivated area, which however does not have a globally accepted definition, is used as the alternative indicator, this area has continuously increased in Sweden. Goal number 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. In global comparison, Sweden generally has good results for almost all of the targets included in this goal. Since 2003, there has been a national public health policy adopted by the Riksdag covering 11 targets area. The overarching goal adopted is to create societal conditions for good health and equal terms for the entire population. So the Health and Medical Services Act stipulates that care shall be delivered with respect to the equal value of all humans and the dignity of every individual. The person with the greatest needs of health care shall be given priority by the health services. In 2015, the average life expectancy for women was 84 years and for men 80.4. Goal number 4 is ensuring exclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Sweden has a well-developed educational system for children, young people, and adults. This is partly reflected by the fact that more than 70% of the adult population participated in some form of education during 12-month periods. Primary, lower education, lower secondary education, and upper secondary school is free for charge, and attendance at primary and lower secondary education is compulsory. So post-secondary education is also free for charge. Access to university and university college studies without an upper age limit creates a lifelong opportunity for higher education. The level of education in Sweden is high and is rising sharply in recent years. About half of the population aged 25 to 64 years old has upper secondary education as their highest level of education. Goal number 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Implicit legislation and the work for gender equality long conducted by many actors, both central government actors and civil society organizations, have led to advances, meaning that Sweden exhibits a high degree of gender equality, especially in international comparison. Since 1994, Sweden has required that official statistics related to individuals shall be disaggregated by sex unless there are special reasons for not doing so. In 2006, the Riksdag established a political goal that women and men have the same power to shape society and their own lives. Government of Sweden has formulated an explicitly feminist policy entailing that gender equality shall play a decisive role in the settling of priorities, both nationally and internationally. At the national level, 6 targets have been identified for the work: equal distribution of power and influence, economic gender equality, gender equal education, equal distribution of unpaid care and household work, gender equal health, and an end to men's violence against women. So in working life, the employment rate of women as a whole in Sweden is 76%, which is the highest in the EU. However, women work part-time to a greater extent than men, have lower wages than men. On average, women's wage are 87.5% for men's wage. For goal 6, clean water and sanitation. Access to clean water and sanitation is largely met for all inhabitants in Sweden. With regard to the global indicators, the primarily assessment can be made that Sweden fulfills the target. The 2017 follow-up of the environmental quality objective, Good Quality Groundwater, shows that there is a need to increase the protection of groundwater resources. Efforts are needed, for example, to reduce pollution due to chemicals, medicines, and nutrients. So, goal number 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Access to energy is good in Sweden and is largely not a problem. The energy issue has linked to several Sweden's environmental objectives, including the environmental quality objective, clean air, reduced climate impact, and a good built environment. Sweden has the highest proportion of final renewable energy used in the EU. The proportion was 53% in 2014, which is to be compared with 40% in 2005 and the EU average of 16% in 2014. However, there are tangible differences between different sectors. Energy intensity has been successively decreasing in Sweden for many years. Sweden has a goal of reducing this intensity by 20% from 2008 to 2020. Goal number 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent working condition for all. Sweden has long been striving to achieve many of the targets encompassed by Goal 8. GDP growth in 2015 was 3% per capita. The average hourly wage for women was CAK 172 in 2015 and for men 196 in the same year. The information sector in Sweden, excluding agriculture, amounted to 3.9% of total wage payment. Unemployment calculated according to UN metadata requirements was 7.5% in 2015 for persons aged 16 to 64. For men, the proportion was 7.7% and for women 7.3%. Of young people aged 15 to 24 who neither work nor study was 6.7% in 2015. So goal number 9 is to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovations. In a global perspective, access to transport infrastructure to people and cargo is good in Sweden. The overarching goal of transport policy is to ensure an economically efficient and long-term sustainable transport supply for individuals and the private sectors throughout the country. The trend in that transport is bearing its own economic costs to a greater extent than before. Greenhouse gas emission from domestic transport shoot about a third of the total emission. Domestic emissions from the transport sectors have been decreasing for several years, in part through a greater use of biofuels and improved energy efficient in road traffic. So in 2015, the added value of the manufacturing industry constituted 14.8% for GDP, corresponding to the approximately CEK 59,000 per capita. In the same year, the numbers of people employed in the manufacturing industry was 501,000. With the additional inclusive of suppliers for services and other inputs good for industry, it is estimated that 1 million Swedes are dependent on industry for their employment. The proportion of small and medium-sized enterprises of the manufacturing industry's added value is calculated to have been 38% in 2015. Sweden's research and development expenditure was CEK 137 billion in 2015, which corresponds to 3.28% of GDP. The private sector is accounted for almost 70%, the highest education sector, which is mostly publicly financed, for 27% of the remaining public sectors for a further 3% of this amount. Goal number 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. The disposable income of households in Sweden has increased over many years, even calculated in fixed prices. At the same time, economic differences and disparities between different groups in society have increased. The gaps between different geographical areas of the country have been growing for a long time. The increasing income distribution for over the past 20 years is due to the fact that growth rate of the 40% of the population with the lowest income have long been lower than both the average and the median of the entire population. The proportion of the population living the income less than 50% of the median income is greatest for younger ages and among those older than 80. The difference between men and women is greatest among those aged over 80, where a greater proportion of women has low income. In its 2017 budget bill, the government stated that an action plan will be produced so as to gradually, before 2030, achieve and maintain a higher income growth than the national average for the 40% of the population with the lowest income. Among people with disabilities, 20% lack a cash margin, that is the margin of unforeseen expenses, and for those with actively compensation or disability allowance, 35% live in relative poverty.
Goal number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Of Sweden's population, 85% live in urban areas. Slums do not exist in any conventional sense. Virtually all homes in Sweden City have functional water, sewage, heating, and
However, there is certain level of overcrowding. According to the norm applied in Sweden, a household is considered overcrowded if more than one person per bedroom lives in the home. Cohabiting couple can, however, share a bedroom, while children are to have their own bedrooms.
An
A person
orderly
living
street
alone in a
network
one-room
with lighting
apartment
and
is
functioning
considered
waste
overcrowded.
management.
With these definitions, 16% of all persons aged 16 and older were living in overcrowded conditions in 2014 and 2015. 6 years earlier, in the proportion was just under 15%. The most recent follow-up using data from 19 Swedish urban areas shows that the development of air quality is largely positive, but that the objectives will not be achieved. So in Sweden, household waste is disposed of an organized form using various treatment methods. Swedish Development Corporation is based on the challenges of growing cities faced by many low and middle income countries, such as health and environmental problems, inequality, poverty, and security problems. This is an important issue, not least in the context of the thematic focus of environmentally and climate-friendly sustainable development. Goal number 12 ensures sustainable consumption and production patterns. Sweden has national plans and strategies in place to promote sustainable consumptions and production, including the Global 10 framework in the Swedish Environmental Objectives System. Greenhouse gas emission with Sweden's borders decreased by 14% between 2008 and 2014. At the same time, emissions have continued to increase in other countries, among them countries from which Sweden imports goods and services. Swedish Development Corporation contributes to the promotion of sustainable production and consumption by supporting a series of areas and collaborations with a wide range of actors, including the private sectors. Development Corporation can, among other things, promote a sustainable business climate and the responsible action for companies according to international norms and guidelines. Goal 13. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Sweden wholeheartedly supports the 2015 Paris Agreement and the goal to keep global warming below 2 degrees with the aim of 1.5 degrees. Sweden sees climate change as one of the humanity's greatest challenge, where time is short for being able to turn global development around. Sweden's greenhouse gas emission decreased by 25% in 1990 to 2015. Changes regarding the heating of houses as well as industry and waste landfills have above all contributed to the emission reduction. Total greenhouse gas emission in Sweden amounted to 53.7 million tons in 2015. Goal number 14, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Sweden has adopted the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. In 2016, Sweden adopted measures entailing that at least 10% of its marine areas are protected. Together with Fiji, Sweden initiated to the major UN Ocean Conference in New York in June 2017, which aims to promote the measures necessary to achieve Goal 14.
The chemical status of Swedish coastal waters is not good due to generally high levels of mercury. Some fish stocks is increasing, while the status of others is critical in parts of the seas surrounding Sweden. Where necessary, in addition to fishing regulation, competent authorities take the initiatives for limitations of fishing in areas that fall outside EU jurisdiction and that Sweden itself governs. These measures can be effective for strengthening fish stocks.
Goal number 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems and sustainably manage forests and combat desertification and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Swedish forestry legislation and the environmental objective systems have provisions and goals that cover most all aspects of this goal. The proportion of woodland of Sweden's total land area is 69% and has been stable at this level since at the least 1990. The standing volume in the Swedish forest has doubled since the 1920s as a result of approximate forest reforestation, forest management, and regeneration felling. Maintaining sustainable forest management in accordance with the Swedish environmental objectives and other priorities will require further work to ensure biodiversity, counteract climate change, and stimulate increased growth and employment. The 16th law is promote peaceful, inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions for all levels. As a peaceful society, Sweden can be assessed to fulfill a number of large targets. For example, as regards effective and transparent institutions with accountability to all levels, the provision of legal identity, including birth registration, for all, and ensuring public access to information and protecting fundamental liberties in accordance with national legislations and international agreements. In October 2016, the government submitted a communication to the Riksdag containing its strategy for the national work on human rights. In this communication, the government makes the assessments that a national constitution for human rights in accordance with the Paris Principles should be established and that this institution should be under the risk that the occurrence of violence in various poses are continued challenge. In November 2016, the government submitted a communication to the Riksdag reporting different measures against inter alia honor-related violence. Sweden is one of the 10 Pathfinder countries in a global partnership to end violence against children. The total number of murders was around 1 case per 100,000 inhabitants in 2016, which was an increase compared with 2011. Men are victims of fatal violence to a higher degree than women. Sweden foreign policy is to be permitted by the defense and protection of human rights, democracy, and principles of rules of law. The government's communication, human rights, democracy, and the rules of law is Swedish foreign policy, which was submitted to the Riksdag in December 2016, and also stated that Sweden is to be a global leader in promoting, preventing, and influencing developments in these 3 areas. Goal number 17. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership of sustainable development. Sweden's domestic resource mobilization constitutes the financial foundation of the Swedish model and the modern welfare state with openness to and cooperation with the outside world. The tax ratio, that is mandatory taxes and social security contributions in relation to GDP at current price was 43% in 2015. The tax ratio was varied between 42 and 46% since 2016. Central government expenditure as a proportion of domestic taxes amounted to 90% in 2015.